According to the latest IPCC report, climate change is widespread, rapid, and intensifying, and some trends are now irreversible. On the other hand, we humans and our ability to innovate and find solutions to seemingly invincible problems are key as we go about to limit the amount of global warming. In the technology sector, Ericsson is leading the way by describing how innovative network performance can reduce energy use. For example, in our Ericsson radio system, we're set to achieve a 35% energy saving by 2022 compared to the legacy portfolio we had in 2016. We're also actively decreasing the company's own carbon footprint. In 2020, we had reduced our emissions by almost 60% compared to 2016, and by over 70% in comparison to 2012. This shows that halving the emissions in less than 10 years is completely possible.
We see that there is a huge must not let go by opportunity to build the buildings we need and that we deserve. And we've come up with a joint up vision, and that was done very much in tune with the high-level champions, the Race to Zero, the Race to Resilience, with the co-leadership as well of the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction as far as the Race to Zero in the built environment was concerned. And it's a vision of sector transformation and radical collaboration across all the sector's actors. And it really says by 2030, we need to halve emissions, whereby 100% of new buildings must be net zero in operation with widespread energy efficiency retrofits of existing assets well underway, and that we need to start tackling the embodied carbon as well. And then we move gradually to 2050 with a full net zero across the whole life cycle of all buildings.
So we have said that by 2030, Volvo Cars should be a fully electric car company, and that is without any caveats or any conditions. We will do this globally, and that is the key thing. But what we also say is that electrification is not enough, and I think this is the key topic to discuss in this panel from my perspective, that we also need to reduce emissions across the board, because of course an electric car is important, but the emissions of the material in this car is of course still there, and they might even be higher than an internal combustion engine version. So we're also focusing on reducing emissions from batteries, reducing emissions from steel, aluminum, etc., to ensure that we take the full life cycle perspective and reduce all of them. And that is what we include when we say that we are to be fully climate neutral by 2040.
We are admittedly the largest single CO2 emitter in Sweden. We make up 10% of the Swedish CO2 emissions, and that is something that we want to change. And we're not talking about reducing CO2 emissions, we're talking about eliminating them, which means that the effect in Sweden will be a 10% reduction in CO2 emissions. For ourselves, the same thing applies. We will be launching fossil-free steel products as a commercial product on commercial terms in 2026, and latest 2045 we will be an entirely and probably the world's first fossil-free steel company.
So far, the way we are getting raw materials is that we dig them up from the ground and we go for the most valuable one. For example, in copper mining, the copper ore is about 0.2% of the total volume, and the rest will be waste. In Ragn-Sell's view, we see that if we approach the materials, especially waste, differently, by going after the material in a logical matter, then we can avoid such high volumes of waste.
With this project, once again, we have a very good example that we can turn waste into a valuable material. And that's really what we believe in at Target. And what we have demonstrated as well is that it's not only good for the environment, it's also very good for reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, because we tend to underestimate significantly the impact which is coming from the incineration of products at the end of its life. So by developing the circular economy, by working on the waste management, we have many positive impacts, both on the environment and also on reducing the greenhouse gas emissions.
The IPCC tells us we have a very small window opportunity for action. And I would like to move away from this polarized discussion, carbon markets, non-carbon markets. Carbon markets is one of many instruments that we will need in these 10 years towards a transition. We have a fossil fuel-based economy, and there will be a number of residual emissions that will be hard to tackle. So we need to do everything that is possible to reduce where we can reduce. And as he said, we need to compensate for the rest. First of all, to put a price on carbon, and second, also to put money on the ground in countries that at the moment don't have the finance to actually finance this transition. And this is just not about profit and so on. It's also about communities that have access to this finance and can adapt to what is already happening, which is global warming.
Yeah.
So they are pledging, basically, that their children or grandchildren will solve this in a future when you can't solve the problem.
True.
And on the same time, they are increasing this number. I mean, we could have COPs, we could talk about pledges, but if we are continuing to sponsoring the fossil fuel industry with trillions of US dollars yearly,
yeah,
it's a waste of time.
This really has to change.
We need to fivefold the ambitions to stay below 1.5. We are one investment cycle away from 2050. Only a fraction of the GHG emissions have an effective price on carbon. About 22% of the emissions in the world are covered with a carbon price, and only 5% of these have an effective price. Last year, the governments raised about $45 billion in revenues from carbon pricing, while, and now we're going to talk about fossil fuels subsidies, amounted to $478 billion. That's 10 times more in subsidies for fossil fuels.
The first question is sort of how fast can you reduce emissions? We know carbon law is 10 years, but actually what is really interesting is from all these 4 initiatives that it's proven that when people start to actually shift consumption, they can cut it by 30 to 50% in 2 years, which is really incredible. It will improve quality of life in terms of health and in terms of feeling that you actually walk the talk. And even financially, because you can sort of cut some unnecessary consumption. I think that is an important key point. But it's also important to state that if you already cut your emissions, maybe to 50%, maybe you shouldn't push it further because it can actually sort of decrease your quality of life. So one, of course, observation is that it might be good to cut it by 50%, and ensuring that it's actually something positive for you, but then instead focus on influencing other people and spreading it, and wait a little bit for society to adapt.
Today, it's cheaper and easier to make bad choices when it should really be the other way around. We have to change the rules of the game. It's time for bold leaders that dares to take bold decisions without having the decision basis that they are used to. Thank you.